Hello and welcome to the Talk with Tariro. Today on the program, we are looking at the need for community response in HIV. And when we are looking at HIV and AIDS, it has not only affected individuals and families, but it has also affected communities. And when you want to look at it broadly, it has affected countries, it has affected us globally. There has been a rise in cases because of this, of child abuse, gender-based violence, as well as the general moral decay, which has led to more risks that are associated to HIV and AIDS. When looking at this, we then say the communities should collectively respond to these challenges so that we can stand a chance to reach the 2030 agenda of ending AIDS, for us to have an AIDS-free generation. We will this week cover the status of our communities when we're looking at HIV, as well as have an overview in terms of issues of child protection and what we need to do as a country to solve this. Helping us in discussing this very important issue is Tinashe Zimondi, who is a program officer with Mashambanzo. Welcome to the talk, Tinashe.
Thank you very much, Tariro.
Yes. When we're looking at HIV and AIDS, it's almost like more than 30 years now.
Yes.
How has it impacted communities?
HIV was a major setback, for development in all aspects of life, whether we're looking at economics, whether we're looking at the social order of our communities. We were on a track to development in a lot of ways, and then it struck. And because a lot of our beloved ones passed on, it means that there were a lot of gaps that were left that I need to be filled, and that put a lot of pressure on the people who remained to then cover those gaps and take those responsibilities. So it really impacted our communities in a very negative way, in that some of the resources that were supposed to be directed towards development, better education, better health services, were then directed to fighting HIV. And we talk of our health sector, for example, right now. You'd find out that a lot of resources, it was hit, with a lot of shock because of coming of HIV, and we had to be aggressive about it, direct all our resources to that, and that. And then because of maybe also now talking of the social order, you'd appreciate that we as Africans have always had a culture of or a system within our families where we have our tetes, our sekurus, offering guidance to the young ones. And unfortunately, we lost a lot of people who would offer us that kind of guidance. And because of that lack of guidance, we had a generation that grew up with very minimal support, with very minimal information, and now we have young people engaging in irresponsible behaviors. That also means that they are being put at risk of contracting HIV and other related sexually transmitted infections. So HIV really did us a very huge negative blow, because we were on some track of achieving some development agendas, but it really came as a setback. So a lot of people then think maybe it's only about the person infected or his or her family. But if we look at a broader aspect of it, we would see that the communities themselves were also negatively affected and left vulnerable because of the coming of HIV.
So when we are looking at the challenges that communities face, how would you help us in unpacking some of those which are related to HIV?
All right, thank you very much. So I'll talk about of poverty. HIV came, like I said, a lot of resources, but then, at that time people were really scared. Some people sold their houses because they wanted to treat their loved one. People were panicking. Some people then left their families because, a lot of people were rejected by their families because of their status. And because of that, many people now, they had a low self-esteem because they thought, my family does not even want anything to do with me. Looking, for example, here at Mashambanzo Care Trust, there was a time where people, would just come and dump their relatives because they're HIV positive and they didn't want anything to do with them. Fortunately, of course, there was an organization like Mashambanzo that was there to fill in that gap.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, for those people to then, recover and then come back and take care of themselves, there was a very huge challenge in that. So that is one of the effects of HIV, of the coming of HIV. So it's one of the problems that we had to deal with. So poverty then came as a result of people being disheartened, people being demotivated, and a lot of organizations maybe that lost decision makers, or companies that lost decision makers. They then started, maybe replacing some of the workers or cutting down, so that a lot of people lost their jobs because of that. And a lot of children were supposed to go to school, and maybe by now were supposed to be occupying very key positions in society, because they lost their parents during that HIV epidemic, where a lot of people died, the 90s, the early 2000s. Those children were then left in poverty. So one of the biggest effects of the HIV pandemic is poverty. And poverty then comes with these other effects. For example, lack of adequate education. That means that in the community we live in, there are some basic things that are not being prioritized by parents. For example, maybe the issue of birth certificates. You understand that for a child to go to school, to be able to write their national examinations, they need to have a birth certificate. But because as a parent, you probably never went through that, because maybe you lost a parent or a guardian was supporting you, you don't see the importance of doing that for your children. So that becomes another effect as well of HIV. Then we talk of economics. As a country, there's a lot of investment that went and is still going towards the fight against HIV. And if we didn't have this monster, we would have maybe made some developments, some strides in other economic aspects. So it's also one of the effects of the HIV epidemic on our communities. Yes.
Yeah, definitely. We are really, for me, it's almost like touch basing on issues of HIV. We are more than 30 years into the pandemic. We still do not have a cure. And looking at where we are now with even the challenges of having COVID coming into the equation, bringing in some of the challenges even that Tafazo has been mentioning. So really we want to look at the need for community response when we are looking at HIV. We'll continue with our discussion after the break. Our discussion continues on the program, where we are looking at the need for the community to respond to HIV. Tinashe, when we are looking at the difficulties that are faced within communities linked to HIV, how have these led to child protection challenges?
Thank you very much. As we were discussing in the earlier segment, Tari, there's that issue of children being left vulnerable and orphaned because of the HIV epidemic. And because of that, that already means there's a child protection question there. Because there's the issue of who is going to be taking care of them. Are they going to do it in the right manner? And because, they're not the biological children, are they going to be taking care of them as much as their parents, if they were alive, are going to be taking care of them? So there's that question of child protection in terms of the care and support that they're receiving. Then we also have the issue of the new challenges that HIV brought about. If a child is sexually abused right now, maybe before the HIV epidemic, we would only be worried about, are they pregnant and are they emotionally hurt? But now, because of the coming of HIV, there's a new question now. Are they not HIV infected through that child abuse? So there's that also new challenge that HIV came with, the issue of the health of the child. So it's very important also to know that it's one of the challenges that we are now facing when we're talking about child protection within our communities. Then there's also the issue of attitudes, maybe mainly to do with stigma and discrimination. Children in their nature, they require support to have a very high self-esteem, to perform very well in school.
Yes.
So, for example, for children who are born with HIV, and maybe some of their colleagues or some of the community members get to know that they're HIV positive, they might be discriminated against, they might be stigmatized, and because of that, it really affects their life in general. So that's also another challenge that HIV has brought about with in relation to child protection. Then there's also that the needs, of more work to be done.
Yeah.
In terms of educating children with regards to sexual reproductive health and rights, to ensure that they make informed decision. And because it's something that came, you'd find out that we are still trying to ensure that the information gets to children.
Yeah.
Up to now, we're still struggling.
Exactly.
Talking, for example, communicating with children about issues to do with sex, issues to take care of themselves. We expect someone else, not the parents, to do that. But it should be something that we have to take interest in and really say, you know what, when we're growing up, this challenge was not there to talk about. We now have to start the conversation so that our children are not harmed and abused in the community.
When you're looking at some mistakes that we still make, yes, indeed, we are more than 30 years into the pandemic. But when you're looking at families, community leaders, in terms of interventions to combat issues of HIV, issues of child abuse, what are some of the mistakes that we need to be worried about?
Thank you very much. I think one of the mistakes that we make is we assume that the job is going to be done by someone else. In social science, we call it social loafing. You're at an organization, and maybe the boss says, I want this report to be done, but he or she does not say it should be done by Tinashe, it should be done by Tari. So I'll just sit and I'll say, Tari will do it. Tari will do the same thing and say Tinashe will do it. So I think leaders do not realize the power that they have. For example, religious leaders, just by calling on parents, to discuss these issues with their children, by calling on, the promotion of making sure that we own the protection of children in our communities. They don't realize the amount of power that they have, and they just assume that, it's the duty of the government, it's the duty of the police. So who are we to be doing this? So I think that's the first thing. The second thing right now, I think it's the justice system. We hear a lot of issues within their communities, and that maybe someone has perpetrated or abused a child, and then the justice system does not do us justice as it's supposed to do.
Yes.
And unfortunately, as community members, as community leaders, as gatekeepers within the community, who we are supposed to be taking charge, of such cases, we just relax and say, you know what, there's nothing much we can do. I think by doing that, we give people the excuse, to continue perpetrating and to continue doing that. So we're not really owning the response as community leaders, as change makers, because we're in those positions for a reason. Then I think also another mistake is failing or refusing to move with the times. We've had a challenge with adolescents and young people, for example, who go to clinics, and we still have nurses who still ask questions. They go to, STI. Where did you get that from? And we try and judge them and discriminate. So it now becomes an unsafe or an uncomfortable space to go to as a young person, to say, I have an STI, I need to go treat it. Very serious, we end up losing some of them. So I think those attitudes and failing to accept, this is the reality, are some of the mistakes that we are making as
So
communities.
sometimes when you're looking at traditional leaders as gatekeepers, they will be thinking, maybe this is my way of preserving our culture. No, during our days we never used to do this. During our days we never used to have sex before we got married. And still refusing to move with the times, like what you are saying.
Yes.
And then still making that mistake. How can that be addressed?
Well, I think sometimes our government has to take an aggressive, perspective to it, because we have some religious sects, of course, that are really promoting early marriages, and the reason they give is that no, my this is our culture, this is our way of doing things, but we can't tolerate that because it's harming someone. And we really have to take care of these children because they're the future generation. So what then we need to do is to be aggressive about it, is to engage with them as traditional leaders, to say, you know what, look, there is always a chance of these children having a bright future. and we can also find a common way of doing things that allows these children to grow up in a healthy manner and not jeopardize their future at the same time.
Well, we will continue with our discussion after the break. Join us. Welcome back. We continue with our discussion, and now on the program, I'm joined by Ronald Semgayo, who is a social worker with Mashambanzo Care Trust. Ronald, welcome to the talk.
Thank you, Tari, for having me.
Yes, you are joining us in the middle of a discussion where Tinashe was unpacking some of the issues. And what we would want to find out from you is when we are looking at issues of HIV and AIDS, child protection, what systems can communities set up when we are looking at dealing with child abuse?
I think the first port of call will be merging a collaborative stance, a collaborative system from all the stakeholders that are involved in HIV, in child protection, and that respond to child abuse and that are there to protect the children. So the first port of call will be having a system that is watertight, that is collaborative, knowing that not one single organization can do all the things that are required. There is the health, there is the justice, there is the psychosocial support that is needed. So it will be creating a synergy between the organizations so that there is a smooth flow, a handing over of cases between all the various stakeholders that are involved.
Talking about handling the various cases, when we are looking at reporting cases of child abuse, where can actually people go to report? Because we often hear people saying, I actually don't know where to go. We talk about, even sometimes people talk about victim-friendly services. People don't know where exactly is it. So where do people go to report? And what are the processes that should be followed? When I know a child next door is being abused, or I know my young sister is being abused, or my own child is being abused.
Thank you, Terry. Dealing with issues of abuse, these are delicate issues. And one thing that is very imperative is that they should be treated with care and with emergency. And the cases of abuse, they are not handled in a one-size-fits-all, depending on what abuse has taken place. But when you are looking at issues of abuse, if it is sexual abuse, it should be handled within 72 hours. Why within 72 hours? Because we need to avoid instances whereby a child can end up being pregnant or having an STI or any other disease due to the abuse. So the first port of call will be the police or a health institution. This all depends on which service is near. So if the health institution is nearer, she should be studying at the health institution. If it is the police that is nearer, it should be the police. Or we have other stakeholders or other organizations that can facilitate taking the child to the police.
Which organizations? Because we need to know them. Which ones?
We have several. We have the government departments, which is the Department of Social Development, formerly the Social Welfare. We have organizations like Childline. We have organizations like MSF. We have City of Harare. We have organizations like Mashambanzo itself, different organizations. Even the police itself, the police through the victim-friendly unit, they can also assist in these issues. And it should be treated as a matter of agency.
When we are looking at now capacitating communities in terms of issues of child safeguarding and school retention, what strategies have you put in place?
Okay, in terms of capacitating communities, first and foremost, we have trained the community as a whole from the early ages up to no age limit in terms of what does it really entail when you speak of child abuse, when you speak of child protection, so that people really know what is child protection, so that they can respond, they can protect the children, they can know that this is child abuse, this is child abuse, this is sexual abuse, this is physical abuse, so that when these things happen, people know that there is an abuse case that has already happened within the community, so that they can respond in a customized manner.
So would you say communities now know when we are talking about, if I say child abuse, if you're saying, yes, you've done that, the awareness, people do know when this is happening is child abuse?
Definitely, definitely. But more is still need to be done because there is still need. There is need for more information dissemination because what happens
What
within
exactly is child abuse anyway?
child abuse? Child abuse. This is the harming of child in different ways. There is sexual, there is physical, there is emotional.
Yes.
So these are all forms of child abuse. Yes. So with the changing of stakeholders, some organizations are closing due to the pandemic, and there are other stakeholders that are coming in board. So there is the need for updating the communities of different stakeholders that are coming aboard, and there are others that are closing by.
Would we say children are also capacitated for them to be able to actually report and recognize abuse?
Definitely, because children, they are the primary stakeholders in terms of child protection and in terms of these abuse cases. So children have to be capacitated, and they have been capacitated so that they can deal, they can report it, they can respond. Because some of the children feel free to talk to their peers other than adults. So there is need, and it has been done to capacitate children so that they know what is child abuse, what is child protection, and how to respond to such cases.
And as a child, how do I respond when abuse is happening within the home?
Within the home, we have also capacitated religious leaders, we've capacitated teachers, we've capacitated all the community members so that children know where to go. She or he can go to a church leader, can go to the police, can go to a health institution, can approach even school authorities to report each and every case of abuse that is happened.
We often know of adults who threaten young people, children, with death after abuse. What message would you give to those children in terms of building their capacity and the need to report?
Okay, as I've mentioned earlier, in Zimbabwe we have a strong systems approach whereby the issues of abuse with the Department of Social Development, which is the overall custodians of all the children in Zimbabwe. So given an instance of whereby a child is being threatened by an adult, the Department of Social Development can remove the child from that community and place him in alternative care until justice has taken place, so that those threats cannot continue to happen, so that justice will not be hindered.
And lastly, what recommendations would you have for community gatekeepers to protect children from HIV as well as abuse?
The collaborative stance is very paramount, and it is also important for the community gatekeepers to keep abreast of all the stakeholders that are within their areas of operation, so that they can refer cases of abuse to different stakeholders, so that children can be helped optimally.
I think the key message that we are getting from Ronald there is, when it comes to issues of child abuse, let's break that silence. I think communities do have information, communities have been capacitated, and let us make an effort to know the different channels and processes that we need to use to report abuse. Until next week, it's goodbye.